highway bridges, Carroll Bridge, Estekam, Dargo Bridge, and Debili Bridge, mined the road, set up roadblocks, and established firing positions on the southern high ground overlooking the highway, the roadblocks, and the destroyed bridges. 4 other outposts and the remaining bases, except the Mashallah base, fell to us by October 31st. The DRA's reaction was slow and incremental. The DRA now lacked sufficient observation and security posts on the high ground flanking the highway. The DRA failed to recapture any of his outposts except the Owa Saleh post. The Owa Saleh post was located on the highest peak overlooking Sorobi and provided observation of Mujahideen groupings and artillery positions. The Owa Saleh post changed hands several times, but we finally held it. The DRA held the Mashallah base throughout the operation. Our attack gained control of this stretch of the highway. DRA reaction was very slow and ineffective. DRA forces in Sorobi fired lots of artillery against my attacking force while their aircraft bombed suspected Mujahideen positions on the rocky ridges south and southwest of the gorge. DRA and Soviet helicopter gunships were not very effective since they did not dare fly low enough through the gorge or fly close to our positions. The DRA made no attempt to outflank NIFA positions from Sorobi or from the eastern mouth of the gorge at Mashallah base. They also made no attempt to use hellborn troops to cut our supply and withdrawal routes. From October 25th through the end of the operation, the enemy concentrated its efforts on building up forces at the 2 entrances of the gorge and continuously tried to demolish our roadblocks and regain control of the gorge section of highway. The DRA launched frontal attacks using infantry supported by tanks moving from the Mashallah base in the east and from Sorobi in the west. The DRA reinforced the beleaguered Mashallah base with elements of the 11th DRA Division, which had been operating in Alangar district of Laghman province. The DRA buildup from Laghman and Jalalabad was possible because Mujahideen groups from Nangarhar province, Task Forces Hurricane, Golf, and Falcon, withdrew a week after overrunning their assigned objectives. The DRA had moved reinforcements and launched attacks in Nangarhar province, and the Mujahideen from the area left to defend their homes. Consequently, the DRA was able to push more troops into the gorge from the east in an attempt to break through the main obstacles between Dargo and Debili. From 25 through 31 October, the DRA launched several unsuccessful attempts to open the road and suffered losses in men and vehicles. As the task forces Falcon, Golf, and Hurricane withdrew from their sectors, 2 mechanized columns of DRA moved into the area from 2 directions. Elements of 8th DRA Division, reinforced with Soviet elements, moved east from Kabul to Sorobi and tried to open the highway. Another column moved west from Jalalabad, trying to overrun Mujahideen blocking positions between Dargo and Debili. The pressure of the 2-pronged attack on the widely scattered Mujahideen groups and the lack of supplies forced me to narrow my front and concentrate in the 4-kilometer stretch between Dargo and Debili, between the 2 highway bridges which his Mujahideen had destroyed earlier. From 1 to 6 November, the enemy moved bridge-building vehicles supported by tanks and motorized infantry to lay bridges across the Kabul River at Debili and Dargo. We Mujahideen repeatedly disrupted and defeated these attempts by firing from the high ground south of the narrow gorge. We also took DRA columns under crossfire from well-prepared positions. During these attempts, the DRA lost several tanks, APCs, and bridging equipment sets. Phase 3. The third phase of the operation was to conduct a large-scale ambush before withdrawal. I ordered all Mujahideen task forces to observe complete radio silence and cease firing effective 2000 hours on 6 November. I further directed some Mujahideen to physically withdraw as part of the deception. The next morning, the entire front was quiet. The DRA moved freely along the highway and replaced the necessary bridges. At 15:30 hours, the DRA started moving large mechanized columns across the Debili Bridge toward Dargo, entering our kill zone. A large number of vehicles entered the kill zone as traffic surged into the gorge from both directions. The two-way lanes were full of vehicles and a traffic bottleneck ensued. The head of the column, coming from the east, reached the repaired bridge at Debili, and the head of the column, coming from the west, reached the newly restored bridge at Dargo. The 4-kilometer stretch between the two restored bridges was jammed with traffic when I gave the signal to open fire. My Mujahideen opened fire along the entire front, taking the DRA by surprise. Mujahideen firing began at 1600 hours and continued until 1900 hours in the evening. We inflicted heavy losses on the trapped columns. The DRA columns retreated to Sorobi. Phase 4. My Mujahideen withdrew without DRA interference. They broke contact during the night following the ambush and returned to their bases. DRA/Soviet losses. Total losses during the entire operation include 42 tanks and APCs, 6 BMPs, 9 artillery pieces, 1 BM-13 MRL, 1 bulldozer, 2 cranes, 65 soft-skinned vehicles, 2 jet aircraft and 1 helicopter gunship destroyed or damaged. Most vehicle losses were inflicted during the Phase 3 ambush. Over 500 soldiers killed or wounded and 212 soldiers and 11 officers captured. 4 pistols, 261 assault rifles, 2 flare guns, 3 light machine guns, 4 medium PK machine guns, 3 heavy 7.62 machine guns, 3 12.7 Dishka machine guns, 7 ZGU-1 14.5mm heavy machine guns, 2 AGS-17 automatic grenade launchers, 13 RPG-7 anti-tank grenade launchers, 7 medium 82mm mortars, and 19 tactical radio sets captured. Mujahideen losses: 18 killed and 53 wounded. Commentary. Operation Arrow was one of the few thoroughly planned and fairly well-coordinated large-scale operations conducted by the Mujahideen. The command and staff and the Mujahideen combatants showed a high level of combat capability and resoluteness during the action. It was a complex, daring undertaking which achieved an ambitious goal. Considering the number of combatants, the time spent for preparation, 2 to 3 months according to General Wardak, the complexity of the planning, the amount of supplies needed to be moved to the battle area, mostly all the way from Pakistan across 3 provinces, Paktia, Logar, and Nangarhar, and the results achieved. It appears that Operation Arrow was an expensive and not very cost-effective venture. Operation Arrow was driven more by political than military considerations. The Soviet Union was withdrawing from Afghanistan, and by this time over half of the Soviet forces had already left. People expected the DRA to rapidly crumble once the Soviets were gone. The various political factions of the Mujahideen were jockeying for position in the post-communist government of Afghanistan. In order to maintain the interest and financial support of their Arab and Western backers, the Mujahideen had to demonstrate their ability to work together militarily, a cooperation that had been lacking, except to some extent in the fighting around Kandahar, throughout the war. This needs for a show of military/political cooperation was one of the key factors in planning and conducting such a large-scale operation in this guerrilla war. Operation Arrow was a success and boosted Mujahideen prestige and particularly promoted the lagging image of the National Islamic Front of Afghanistan, NIFA, which enjoyed the greatest military success during the operation. Militarily, the resources could have been better used by substituting a series of smaller actions, conducted successively by groups of about 50 to 70 Mujahideen at a time, at different points along the highway. These actions would each last for a few days over an extended period of time. Such an option, although not very spectacular, would effectively block the highway for a longer period of time than during Operation Arrow. The DRA losses would not have been spectacular each time, but should have ended with higher overall losses. While NIFA could afford to launch an Arrow-sized operation once a year, it could conduct several similar operations of smaller size with the same or less cost in men, material, time, and other resources. The political requirement to employ the forces of 4 Mujahideen factions to close the Kabul-Jalalabad highway for 2 weeks each was an expensive option. It required 4 separate deployments of forces, 4 separate plans of operation, 3 relief operations as one faction took over the task from another, and 4 withdrawals. This inevitably entailed tactical and logistic duplications, unnecessary transportation costs, and the tactical complications involved with relieving one group by another over a wide front. Dividing the area into 4 sectors, each the responsibility of one faction for a period of 8 weeks, would have achieved the same goal with fewer complications, lower costs, better logistic support, and more focused action. However, the lack of a unified political and military leadership and factional differences among the Mujahideen prevented this option. The combined command and staff of the Mujahideen force showed a high level of professionalism and operational vision in both planning and execution. The movement of a large force from widely dispersed bases to the area of operation and providing for its logistic support using very limited local resources is an extremely challenging task. The leadership of the force accomplished this with admirable effectiveness. The impact of the operation went far beyond the tactical and operational level, contributing to strategic and political destabilization of the Soviet-backed government in Kabul. The operation panicked the DRA government, which committed unnecessarily large forces into the area and accepted heavy casualties. But the Mujahideen also paid a political price for the operation. The highway closure caused losses to civilian merchants who, at this time of the year, export pomegranates from Tagau and grapes from Kabul to Pakistan. The fresh fruit and vegetable trade is one of the major sources of income in Afghanistan. During the first week of November, representatives of fruit dealers appealed to the Mujahideen to open the highway, but to no avail. In a guerrilla war, support of the local population is too valuable to be risked by actions that hurt local economy. Tactically, the DRA committed several errors. Inadequate DRA reconnaissance allowed the Mujahideen to deploy a several thousand-man force within a short distance of DRA positions without detection or interruption. Most of the Mujahideen movement took place at night and employed natural cover and concealment in the mountainous terrain. However, a more active DRA reconnaissance would have disclosed the Mujahideen's secret deployment and allowed countermeasures to interrupt the Mujahideen preparations for the operation. DRA failure to establish and man observation posts on the higher mountains also let the Mujahideen move into the area and prepare attack positions undetected. The enemy forces in Sorobi were in a favorable tactical position to launch a flanking attack against the main base of the Mujahideen toward Hisarak. Such a move, supported by air and artillery support, should have foiled the Mujahideen operation and cut off their withdrawal. Such a move, supplemented by heliborne landings behind the Mujahideen lines, could have created chaos and forced the Mujahideen to abort the operation. The DRA reaction, however, was reactive and unimaginative. The road-bound DRA forces paid heavily for this leadership failure. Falling into the final Mujahideen ambush was the worst and the most costly DRA mistake. After the Mujahideen guns fell silent, the DRA did not bother to ensure that the silence really meant that the Mujahideen had withdrawn and was not a calm before the storm. The DRA then allowed too much traffic to move down the unsecured highway. The DRA traffic jam occurred right in the Mujahideen kill zone. The 2 following vignettes describe battles within Operation Arrow on the eastern approaches to the gorge.